Now we turn our attention to Catherine Hammond from the Hammond Law Group right here in Colorado Springs. Catherine, great to see you as always. How are you this morning?
I am fabulous. Thank you.
Good.
I do enjoy our last month and a half of summer here.
Exactly. How can it possibly be? I mean, we were just talking about, the hill climb and Memorial Day, and now all of a sudden it's going to be fall before we know it.
What happened is we blinked.
And that does seem to be all it takes. So, Catherine, how's business? How are things going?
Oh, business is really good. Often things slow down a bit in the summer because people would rather be out having fun than thinking about disability and death.
Right.
But for some reason this summer, that hasn't been the trend that we've seen. People have not forgotten about these important things this summer. And we're keeping busy.
Good. So attendance at the workshops have been good as well?
Attendance has been great.
Excellent.
Yes, people are just hungry for information, and I'm grateful for a place that they can come get information that's not a pushy, salesy kind of place. So.
Right, exactly. And how can people get a hold of you? Let's do that first so we get that out of the way in the first part of the show, and then we'll do it again later on.
Yeah, well, first of all, our website has all kinds of good information. So that's coloradoestateplan.com, or you can call our office at 719-520-1474. Sounds
good. So when are the next workshops coming up?
Our next workshops, that's a great question. I'm going to check. I should know that off the top of my head, but I'll let you know in just a minute here.
Well, you have peeps for that, so no worries. So we want to talk about funeral planning this morning. This is something that oftentimes people really do overlook. We're in a situation right now where my mother-in-law has taken a turn for the worse, and the good thing about all this is that we know what her plans are, what she wants to have happen after she passes away. I mean, everything's pretty much in place, where the service is going to be, what kind of service it's going to be. She's going to be cremated and put into the urn with her husband, who has already passed away. So all of this is in place. Her will is in place. So I think we've got all the pieces where we need them to be at this point, but that certainly isn't the case for everybody.
It's not the case for most of us because most of us don't want to talk about funeral planning or even think about it ourselves. And so people, when a loved one passes away, typically, the first thing that we have to do is figure out burial or cremation and make all of the memorial service plans and where we're going to be laid to rest plans. Our families are in shock.
Sure.
If you've lost anybody close to you, it's hard to even think about the most basic of things and make basic decisions.
When you're grieving.
Right. And we tend to walk around in a fog. And then in a family, if you have more than one family member, everybody's in a state of shock, and suddenly all of those emotions are brought to the surface, and all of the childhood stories are brought to the surface about mom always loved you more, or you always got everything that you wanted, or whatever, those stories from our history might be. So in the middle of that, with the tough decisions and the emotions and the family issues, is the worst time to be trying to make the basic important decisions. So pre-planning about that can make it a whole bunch easier. And if you don't talk about it beforehand, your family members, if you have more than one, are probably going to have different ideas about what you want, and that creates conflict.
Right, and there's no telling what the person wants unless the person tells you in advance.
Exactly.
And so as we go through this process, Catherine, I know that there can be conflicts brought to the front, and that's never a good thing. So if you manage to get your loved ones, all of them should be doing this on an ongoing basis, updating their funeral plans if they change, updating all of these things. But for the person who is most likely to die first, be that an elderly relative or whatever it might be, it is really a shock. And when you think about all that is involved, you don't want to make funeral decisions when the person hasn't even been cold for a week yet. So is it a good idea to sit down as a family and hammer these things out?
Absolutely. So step one is making all of the plans and can talk through a lot of the different things that you want to plan for. Step two is then having the conversation with your family about what you want and why it's important to you, as well as your expectations for how your family gets along after you're gone. Setting that kind of expectation ahead of time, that the most important thing to me is not exactly how things go or exactly where I end up. It's that you guys maintain a positive relationship. That's the key to me. I don't want any fighting. Can help set the tone.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And some of the things that we need to roll through while we are planning for the inevitable, I mean, it comes down to even things like, what music do you want played at your service?
Exactly. So the first issue to tackle is, how are we going to pay for your final expenses? A lot of people think that if they have money in the bank or a life insurance policy, that their family members will be able to access that and pay for their funeral.
But I felt a but coming on, Catherine.
Yes. The problem with that is you can't access somebody else's bank account, even if it has a POD beneficiary on it, nor can you access the life insurance until you have a death certificate.
Right.
It can take several weeks to get a death certificate in El Paso County. The funeral home will not wait several weeks to be paid. The funeral home needs to be paid today. And for good reason, they can be really pushy / sometimes feel ugly about it. And I'm sure it's because they've been burned many, many times. So you have to have money available today to pay for your funeral. So you have a couple of different ways that you can do that.
Okay.
If you have loved ones who have money available to them, either a good chunk of money on a credit card, probably somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 for all of the expenses, maybe travel for immediate family members, things like that. So either family members who have money, or doing a prepaid funeral plan through a funeral home is another good way to go. It locks in the pricing typically. The one drawback to that is that if they go out of business, if you move, you might not still have coverage. So the other kind of pre-planning for payment of your final expenses that we have grown to really like is called a funeral trust.
Okay.
It's really just a prepaid life insurance policy, and it's a special funeral policy. So you put in $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever you think your family's going to need. It grows at a rate of interest. For our clients, we set it up with a 1% annual interest return on it, which is actually something to write home about.
I was going to say, that's much better than we get with our 0.25% over getting a CD over at the bank.
Right, exactly. So 1% interest that it earns, and then it is available within 24 hours of your death, payable directly to any funeral home that your family chooses.
Really?
And any extra money goes back to your family. If you put more in there than is needed, goes to your family.
Wow, I had never heard of this.
It's a fabulous thing, and there's not a cost for it because it's a life insurance product. When we set one of those up for our clients, or we can set them up for anybody, you don't have to be a client of ours. When we set them up, there's no extra cost. We get a small commission from the life insurance company, so that you don't have to pay anything to set it up this way, just like any life insurance
That
policy.
is a great idea.
It really is a win-win-win for everybody, and the funeral home gets paid right away.
Right. Now, has that been around for a while?
It's been around for at least, 4 or 5 years is how long I have known about it.
Okay.
I don't think it's been around for much longer than that.
That's really interesting. I mean, and it's a perfectly sensible thing to do, and I'm glad that the insurance companies offer that now.
Yeah, it's fabulous. And not all insurance companies offer it. It's just select companies. There was one company that we happen to have a relationship with that started that product. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
And I also wanted to ask you, going back to the funeral home for just a second, it pays to do your research when it comes to funeral homes and providers, correct? I mean, because like you said, if they go out of business, and there are some fly-by-night operations out there, and we've seen the results of it in recent days and weeks here in Colorado Springs. People kind of left holding the bag, so to speak, because the place is absconded with their money, and that's the end of that. So you got to do a little research, right?
You do have to do research, but I'll say I think research is not a guarantee.
No. No, it's like
There are
future
issues
returns.
that can be going on that nobody knows about yet, where, you've probably heard the stories nationally where it turned out that they were like, throwing bodies in the backyard and all
Yes.
kinds of
Horrifying
crazy
things, yeah.
Right. So some things the best research in the world won't tell you. But do your research. Check online sources to get reviews and testimonials. That'll tell you a lot of the best information that you might be able to get.
Catherine Hammond, our guest here on the program. More with her coming up right after this here on KRDO. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. It is The Extra here on KRDO News Radio. Catherine Hammond's our guest with the Hammond Law Group here in Colorado Springs. And Catherine, we also have to, when we're talking about funerals, we're not just talking about things like expenses, but we're also talking about wishes, correct? I mean, things like burial versus cremation, those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And that can be a big deal, especially for your loved ones once you're gone. If some of your family thinks that you wanted to be buried and some of them think that you want to be cremated, if you have a will in place, your executor or personal representative has the right to make that choice. But that can create all kinds of conflict within your family. And then from there, let's say that we know that you wanted to be buried. What kind of casket? Where do you want to be buried?
Where is the key?
Yeah,
because you
that's
have
a
to,
big deal.
Yeah, and plots are not cheap. And once again, those have to be taken care of in advance as well.
Right, absolutely. And if you're cremated, where would you want your ashes spread? Do you want them in an urn? Do you want them to be spread in the mountains, in the sea? Like, people have all kinds of different wishes.
Sure.
Some people have more specific wishes than others. But again, the problem is once you're gone, you may not care where your ashes go or where your body goes. It's your family.
Right.
So when my mom passed away, and as you know, she spent 20 years in a nursing home with early onset Alzheimer's. I, of course, when I was a teenager, when she was developing Alzheimer's, didn't talk to her about her final wishes. That was the last thing on my mind.
Right.
And so when she finally passed away, we thought that she wanted to be cremated. We had some reasons to believe that was what she wanted. And so we chose a place, my brothers and I, and my brothers had not been involved with her care for those 20 years, really, for their own reasons. And I had been taking care of her and making all of the decisions. So when she passed away, everybody had their ideas. We put her ashes on Pikes Peak, but it ended up being in a place that my brothers chose and I didn't think was the best place.
Wow.
And so I ended up going back several days later, picking up some of her ashes and taking them to a place where I thought that she would want them.
Wow.
And where I could visit.
That's just wild. Catherine Hammond, our guest, back with more after this here on KRDO. Welcome back to the show. It's The Extra here on KRDO News Radio. I'm Paul Richards, and we're thrilled to be joined in studio by Catherine Hammond. She's one of our faves. She's with the Hammond Law Group here in Colorado Springs. And we were talking about what happens after you die and what your funeral arrangements might need to be consisting of and how the family can get all on one page about this. And one of the things that we were talking about, Catherine, is, I mean, you have to think about everything from what you want on your marker, should you not be cremated, to things like whether or not you're going to allow your organs to be donated or even your whole body, right? I mean, I know they're details, but they're very important details.
They're really, really important details. And having those things figured out, because the organ donation decision has to be made before you actually pass away, typically.
Right. Now, can that be outlined in a will? Or where is the proper place for those kinds of decisions?
Yeah, typically you want it in a separate document.
Okay.
And in Colorado, we have the benefit of being able to do that directly on our driver's license.
Right.
A lot of people have a little heart on their driver's license indicating that they would donate their heart or other organs. But you can also, there's a document that you can fill out that indicates that. So,
okay.
But it's a little bit duplicative if you have that on your driver's license.
But if folks are older and they don't have a license anymore, or it's
Right.
not in force, those decisions might not be in force as well. Is that how that works?
Yeah, they would still have a state ID.
Oh,
And
right. Okay.
yes, and I believe on the state ID they still carry that organ donation symbol.
Okay.
So making it easy for everybody. I think that's something that we as a society put a high value on. So we
Yes,
try
it
to
is.
make it as easy as possible. When my mom passed away, she had the Alzheimer's. I donated her brain for research because I knew that she would want to do anything she could to help other people. And it was quite difficult to figure out how to do that.
Really?
And then we had to pay in order to make that happen. So
That seems
yeah.
very odd.
Yeah. But I think researchers have limited money.
That's true.
And so that's how they cover it.
Now, let's also talk about, a lot of people after they pass away want at least a portion or maybe their entire estate to go to charity. I mean, we've seen the commercials, you can set up this I'm thinking particularly of places like Hillsdale College, Rocky Mountain PBS, those kinds of places. They will help you arrange to leave your entire estate or part of it to them.
Right. And they will help make it very, very easy. And even related to your funeral, you can, for a lot of people, they don't want flowers. They want charitable donations to be made instead. So there are a whole variety of ways. Most people that I know would like to make some sort of difference in this world that goes beyond their lifetime. So putting something in your will, maybe a specific gift of a dollar amount or a percentage of your estate. I'm such a big believer in people giving even 1% of your estate to charity. Your loved ones will never miss 1%.
Right.
And it's a really big deal to whatever organization you give that to. We should talk more about charitable donations and planned giving sometime. But then even little things like those charitable donations that we might put in your obituary,
Right.
Saying who you would want donations made to,
Right.
if you don't feel the need for flowers once you're gone.
In lieu
So,
of flowers,
yeah,
donate to
yeah.
whatever organization it might be. Of
Exactly.
course, the florists don't like to hear
Yeah.
that, but it is one of the things
Right.
that happens on an ongoing
or maybe
basis.
in addition to. A lot of people might do it in addition to making a floral gift. So, and then so many questions about, do you want flowers for your memorial service, whatever kind it is? First of all, I have a lot of people say, I don't want a memorial service. I don't need a memorial service. I've even had people try to make that a stipulation for their family.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
And I think it's too bad, and I try to help people reconsider that, because the memorial service is not for you, it's for your family.
Right. It's for
We
them to
need
come together.
Yeah, and to go through a grieving process, and being able to do that in community a little bit can be really, really helpful. So I encourage people not to require their family not to have a service. But for your service, what kind of music you want?
Sure.
Is there poetry you want? What style? I had a client say, I want a memorial service in the style of an English pub.
What?
Right. Beer and exactly. They wanted it to be
Great.
a celebration.
Well, and that's the way it should be, really. A celebration of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Where you want it to be held. If you have a preference about who might deliver a eulogy, about who you might want to officiate, flowers, what you want to be wearing if you're going to be buried and in a coffin, then all of those are things that you can set out ahead of time and make a whole lot easier for your family. All of those little decisions take a ton of energy. Each one of them does.
Right.
So,
Especially if you're in the grieving process. And
Right.
You don't really want to be or are in a mental state to be
Right.
making those decisions. Now, as a corollary to all this, Catherine, one of the things that I know that you are a big advocate of is long-term care planning. And that's something that, has really not been thought of too much until really recently. I mean, it's been a matter of, well, I'm going to save for retirement, but you never thought about the long-term care component. And now that costs have gotten so high for that long-term care, it's something that people really need to engage in.
every single one of us needs a long-term care plan. because if we have the blessing of living a good long life, there is a high probability that we won't be able to live completely on our own. And if we can't live completely on our own, there's a financial component to that. So there's both where you would want to be, what kind of care you would want to receive, and then also how are we going to pay for it? And that's the one, but both of those are really heavy issues that merit some real discussion and planning within every single family.
Right.
The where you want to be, what kind of care you want to get is a really big topic. The place that I like to start people with is how are we going to pay for it if I need care? Because you really have three basic options. You can save a ton of money and pay for it all yourself. Average cost of a nursing home these days in Colorado is creeping up on $90,000 a year.
Yes.
That will eat through most people's life savings really quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't take long at all.
Right. Imagine if you and your spouse are in a nursing home. That's close to $180,000 a year. So if you have a good chunk of savings, that might be the best way to pay for that. And if it's well invested, making a good return on your money, that might be the best way to pay for long-term care, least expensive to yourself. Most people don't have millions of dollars to play with when they hit that point in life.
Right.
So you have two other options if you don't have an unlimited supply of money for that chapter of your life. One of them is long-term care insurance.
Right. And this is one of the most popular products on the market today, all of a sudden.
I love long-term care insurance because it can buy you the quality of care that you deserve. If you don't have enough money and don't have long-term care insurance, you have to go on Medicaid.
Right.
And that limits your care options.
Right. And that also means that you're going to have to pretty much liquidate all of your assets.
Right.
I mean, almost all of them.
Exactly. Down to the last $2,000. Everything. So long-term care insurance can buy you the kind of care that you deserve and also keep you from having to spend every penny of your money. And my father has had some medical issues for years, and my stepmother does a valiant job of taking care of him, but it's more than a full-time job. And so she has had, for the last several years, somebody coming into their home. It's now 5 days a week for 8 hours.
And that's not cheap either.
It's not cheap, but their long-term care insurance is paying for it. I don't know if they would have done that if long-term care insurance wasn't paying. And it's a huge quality of life thing for her.
It definitely is. Catherine Hammond, our guest on the program. We'll spend our remaining time with Catherine coming up right after this here on KRDO. Stay with us. Catherine Hammond's our guest here on the program today. We're talking about all things funerary, all things that have to do with long-term planning. And Catherine, we left off with really, you got to have long-term care insurance now. This is just not an option. It's just something that has to be done.
I very strongly recommend it. At least everybody needs to get a quote and make an informed decision about it. And I recommend that you work with somebody who specializes in long-term care planning, not a whole menu of different kinds of insurance, because it's such a complex area in terms of the different options, even for your traditional long-term care policy. But there are a whole bunch of hybrid versions of long-term care insurance that are available these days. Picking the right one for you is something that really an expert is the best one to help with.
Right. So don't go to the guy who does your car and home insurance.
No, go to somebody who has a great, solid reputation. We have one person in particular to whom we refer pretty much everybody.
Hey,
so.
And before I forget, you looked up when the next workshops are.
Yes, we actually have workshops coming up in just a couple of weeks on Wednesday, August 24th at 2 o'clock and 6:30 p.m. Sky Sox Stadium has a cool little room that we get to spend some time in.
How cool is that?
Looking out over the baseball field.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday morning, August 27th at 10 o'clock.
And people can get more information at the website?
Yes, our website, you can register. Just look for workshops. That is coloradoestateplan.com. or you can call our office at 719-520-1474.
So let's talk a little bit more about long-term planning. If you don't have a lot of money in the bank and you don't have insurance, you can still avoid going completely broke, right?
Yes, you can. So let's say that you don't have millions of dollars to pay for years of nursing home care, and you didn't buy the long-term care insurance that we're recommending that you buy. A lot of people end up in a situation where they have maybe $500,000 left, maybe a home and $100,000. I have a lot of folks who have a precious asset in their family, maybe an inherited farm or other piece of property, mineral interests, that they really, really want to make sure stays in their bloodline.
Right.
Even if somebody is already in a nursing home today, spending down their estate, there are still things that you can do to keep some of your assets in your family. Even at the last minute, we can typically protect at least a third of whatever you have today. If you plan at least 5 years ahead of time, there's something called a 5-year look-back period. So anything that you rearrange for 5 years before you need to go on Medicaid is going to create a little bit of a penalty period for you before you can qualify for Medicaid. But if we do some rearranging and there's a 5-year gap, we can protect 100% of whatever we used in our rearranging, whatever assets we rearranged, typically. If you don't have 5 years, if you're already in a nursing home spending down your money, we can still typically protect at least a third of your assets by doing what we call crisis Medicaid planning.
Okay.
There are a wide variety of tools that we can use. You really, really need to talk to somebody. I do not recommend just making a gift of your house and your bank accounts to your children. There are complex issues around that. If, let's say, that you give your house to your daughter, who's very responsible, and then her husband takes off with the next door neighbor, guess who gets half of that house?
Yes, he does.
Yep. So all kinds of things can come up, even in terms of your eligibility for Medicaid. So talk to a lawyer before you do anything like that.
Catherine, I can't believe time's up. I mean, we just go through this show so quickly, and I always learn so much from you. I can't thank you enough for coming in. It's always great to talk to you, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon.
I can't thank you enough for having me.
And how do
Thanks
people
so
get a
much.
hold of you?
They can call our office, 719-520-1474, or go online, coloradoestateplan.com.
And we've got workshops coming up. You can find out about those at the website as well. Catherine, have a great weekend, and thanks again for coming in. We'll get you on the schedule again real soon.
Awesome, and all the best to you and your mother-in-law.
And thanks very much for that. We appreciate it a ton. All right, kids, that's it for another edition of The Extra here on KRDO News Radio. More on Monday, and Tom Martino, the troubleshooter, he's up next here on KRDO, so stay with us.